Arsenal, thank you so much for sticking around with us. Hey, today I'm continuing our series of talks on the story of Gideon. Last week, Rob kicked it off. If you didn't see it, go check it out. I bet we can link it up here somewhere. Go check it out. Make sure you are tracking where we're at. And I mean, it gives you a lot of background and kind of where we're headed with this story. Today, I'm going to continue in this series, and I'm excited about it. There's this statement that is made in one of my favorite books. It's called The Cure. And it says this: my view of myself is the best commentary on my view of God. My view of myself is the best commentary on my view of God. I put it this way: who I see myself to be is a reflection of who I see God to be. Last week, Rob started off this series and he talked a lot about the first part of this statement, how we view ourselves, what our view of ourselves really means as we step into this relationship with God. And this week, we're gonna look at the second part of that statement through the lens of Gideon. We're gonna look at how we see God affects how we see ourselves. I've got a question for you. And we've asked this question before, but here it is. Have you ever doubted God? And I don't mean like you said a prayer and kind of hoped that Ferrari would show up in your driveway the next day and you were pretty sure it wasn't going to happen. You know, like those just outlandish. I'm not saying that. I'm saying like at the core, like have you really ever doubted God and who God is at his very essence, at his core? I wrote a little on this earlier this week on my social media, but when I was in Iraq, my first deployment, I was there in 2005 and I was with the Army. I'd never really been out of like the culture of our country, but here I am. And I'm in Iraq in 2005, and it's what I now refer to as like my first ever probably crisis of faith. At the time in Iraq, I would have said that I was just like losing my salvation or losing my mind. Either way, they weren't good, right? Like something was going on with me and I wasn't really quite sure what it was. Just to give you some context, I was like 23 probably. What year is that? 05? 23. I was 23 years old. I had dropped out of Bible college and I joined the Army, and here I am in Iraq in a brand new culture. It was the first time I'd ever really experienced a whole other culture or mindset. Like actually like being embedded in it. Like I said, I dropped out of Bible college and then I joined the Army, and maybe a year later, I'm plopped into the middle of Iraq. And my job in the Army was to interact with local Iraqis. I had to interact with the people. That was my job. I had to befriend Iraqis, create some type of rapport with them, and then convince them to share like sensitive information with me or share intel, right? Intel with me on the bad guys in that part of the country. So pretty quickly, I learned that I had to understand their culture and understand their mindset to make all of this happen and for it to work well. I also had the job of interrogating some of the detainees that were committing terrorist attacks against Americans and against Iraqis. They were doing these things, and I would be thrown in to interrogate, not thrown in. That was my job. I was there to interrogate. So I would interrogate them. I would try to get more information out of them. I would try to figure out their motives on why they were doing things. And I remember during that time having very intense discussions with God. After interrogating some of these individuals that had just tried to blow, I remember one specific, like interrogating this guy that had literally just tried to blow me and a bunch of my friends up with a car bomb. And here I am interrogating this guy, and he's convinced that he's doing the work of God, or Allah, as he would have said. I was shook by the idea that a belief system, that a religion could lead someone to think that killing another human being was doing the work of God. I know we probably aren't talking about the same God, right? As these men were that were Muslims. But just the thought of religion leading people to hatred was shocking to me. I watched as other soldiers, mainly ones whose jobs weren't to be as embedded in the culture as mine, right? They interacted at a distance from the locals interact. I watched as they would treat local Iraqis like animals at times, or less than them, less than human, right? Guys I knew grew up in the church in the U.S., guys I knew would believe in the same God I believe in, and would profess the same convictions that I did. But they were treating other human beings as less than them. And it brought up a lot of questions for me. 23-year-old Chad sitting in his dorm room, or in his barracks, barracks when I was in Iraq, trying to figure out the world and figure out God, and just culturally shocked in the moment. It was the first time that I was really digging into my relationship with God and who I truly believed God to be. I didn't feel like I knew God very well at all. You know, I'd grown up in church, and we went to church all the time. We went to, Sunday school. We went to service, and in our denomination, it was service in the morning on Sundays, service at night on Sundays. Wednesday night was youth group. Sometimes Friday night was prayer time. Like, we were at the church all the time, but I just didn't feel like I knew God for myself and really knew who God was. I think I felt like I knew God at a surface level, and I was really having a hard time with him. I thought God didn't like me very much unless I was doing all I could for him. I thought in order to be liked by God, much less loved by him, I had to work my butt off to impress him. And even that was short-lived. I sure as heck wasn't trying to take him off, though, or make him mad, right? Like that was a no-go for me. And I feel like in the book of Judges, where we step into the story of Gideon, Gideon can relate to me in a lot of ways, or I can relate to Gideon in a lot of ways, right? Gideon has been called a mighty man of valor by God. We saw that last week as Rob talked about it. He's been asked to step into this place where we're seeing Gideon is about to assemble an army to go lead Israel out of oppression, to go save the people of Israel from their oppressors. And I feel like he's trying to buy into the idea that he is who God says he is, but we see why it might be tough for him in this part of Judges 6. In Judges 6, verse 33, it begins like this. All the Midianites and the Amalekites, the Easterners, got together, crossed the river, and made camp in the valley of Jezreel. God's Spirit came over Gideon. Some translations say that God's Spirit clothed Gideon. He blew his ram's horn trumpet, and the Abiezrites came out, ready to follow him. He dispatched messengers all through Manasseh, calling them to battle. Also to Asher, Zebulun, and Naphtali. They all came. So all these people from different regions, his own people, and then people from different regions around, different tribes, came at this call to assemble, to go to war. And it says, Gideon said to God, if this is right, if you're using me to save Israel, as you've said, then look, I'm placing a fleece of wool on the threshing floor. I'm placing this wool on the ground. If